Members, the House is in committee on the Parliament Bill and the Land Transport Time of Use Charging Amendment Bill. We will start with the Parliament Bill. We come first to Part 1. Part 1 is the debate on clauses 3 to 8, preliminary provisions and Schedule 1. The question is that Part 1 stand apart. The question is that the Minister's amendment to Part 1's... I'm going to make an exception this time because there were a few people wandering around and I did not see the member who ably chaired the committee. So I'll take a call. Right Honourable Adrian Rurawhe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm out of practice. I just wanted to make a brief call on Part 1 of the bill. Basically to say it's important that and correct and right that these 4 pieces of legislation be brought together into one new piece of legislation. And the only other point that I would make is that, and it'll become relevant later on in the debate, is that it does not include the Official Information Act. And why I say that is because several submitters made submissions on that part, on the Official Information Act, to bring Parliament's information under that as well. And so those were deemed by the committee to be out of scope of this bill. That's my brief introduction, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity.
Bennett.
Good, Madam Chair. As we begin the start of the committee stage of this bill, I do look at the Part 1 and the purpose, Clause 3, and I guess what I want from the Minister is the purpose, as it says on currently, is the purpose of the Act is to consolidate and modernise the law about operating and administrating Parliament. And the reason I'd be interested in the Minister making a contribution is just for the public to understand what this is about, because I very much think this bill is about this place and about the people in this place and how it's funded and the goings on. And so for us, we don't want to labour the committee stage, but we do want to be seen to actually prosecute and ask some questions to give confidence to the public that they understand what this bill is about. And it's not just for us as MPs finding a way, I guess, to feather our nests or to make it easy for us, but it's to help make the system better.
Honourable Chris Bishop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an important bill, and I thank members of the opposition and others for their constructive engagement on this. We had a special select committee on this, which I think is duly appropriate. It was well chaired by former Speaker, Right Honourable Adrian Rurawhe, and thank you for his contribution. This is an important piece of legislation, probably one that's a little bit overdue, and one that past governments and past houses, past parliaments have looked at. It brings together the Clerk of the House of Representatives Act 1988, the Parliamentary Service Act 2000, the Members of Parliament Remuneration and Services Act 2013, and the Parliamentary Privilege Act 2014. A couple of things going on there. One is that if you want to understand how Parliament operates and how it's funded and what its powers are and all of the legislation to do with Parliament, there isn't one place to find it. You've got to go look at those 4 acts. And this, if it becomes law and the House approves it, it will become the Parliament Act 2025 and it will be the one place. Now, people might say, well, bringing together legislation, that doesn't really seem like much of a deal, but actually it's important to the rule of law and cogency of the statute books that we don't have random pieces of legislation that do different things but all actually relate to the same topic, or in this case relate to the same institution. It's a very important home of our democracy. The second thing is that some of these statutes are quite out of date. So the last time we went through a serious round of kind of parliamentary reform was actually in Sir Geoffrey Palmer's day, that great reforming period from 1987 through 1990 that a bit controversial in some respects for some, but from a parliamentary point of view, quite a lot was done by Sir Geoffrey back then as Attorney General and Minister of Justice and Leader of the House to create essentially the modern day foundations of the Parliament's Select Committee system, for example. But the Clerk of the House of Representatives Act got its own act back in 1988 during that period. The Parliamentary Service Act 2000 is now 25 years old as well, and so it is about modernising this legislation. Parliament, in relation to the Parliamentary Privilege Act, Parliament went through an exercise soon after I became an MP, or it might have been contemporaneously when I became the MP, about responding to the judgment of Attorney General and Lee from memory, and there was another case as well in which it became, without boring the House, it became really clear that Parliament had to reassert the traditional privileges that exist for all members in this House around freedom of speech and put into statute some common law rights that had perhaps, at least arguably, contestably at law, didn't exist, or we need to make clear that they did exist. So the Parliamentary Privilege Act was a response to court judgments, and now it's going to be a part of the Parliament Act. There are some important changes that the Parliament bill, this bill, makes in relation to parliamentary security, which no doubt we'll get to. It also importantly changes the funding model, and in particular it gives Parliament more independence from the executive in relation to the funding of Parliament. And in our Westminster system with our fused executive and legislature. By definition, the government governs and controls the budget, but actually Parliament is its own separate institution, and there's always been a natural tension there, which actually, to be honest, you can't get rid of entirely, but there's always been a tension between the operation of the funding of Parliament, the legislature, its own institution, and the executive, which by definition is only the executive because it has control of the Parliament. If that wasn't the case, they wouldn't be the executive. And so what this bill does is put in place a more independent process in which the House is in charge of its own budgets. There is some involvement of the executive, but it's a step forward from the status quo where I think most people would say it's more biased towards the government. That hasn't really been a problem, to be honest. I hope both sides of the House would agree on that. Hasn't really been a problem in practice. But there's always the potential, and law is sometimes not about necessarily solving the problems of today. It's about future-proofing to make sure we don't enjoy problems, or we don't endure problems in the future. So that's the purpose of the Parliament Bill.
Okay, so for those who are wondering, it is to sit there and summarise, multiple acts that govern Parliament. Now, the interesting fact is, because we're a constitutional monarchy with no written constitution, a lot of our laws are based on convention, which then have later been updated into acts that have been put in there. And the acts that, as you can sit there and see what Chris Bishop did mention on there, was the Clerk of House of Representatives 1988, the Parliamentary Services Act 2000, the Members of Parliament Remuneration and Services Act 2013, the Parliament Privileges Act 2014, and also it's and obviously it's going to combine it into one bill called the Parliamentary Act 2025. I'm pretty sure it will sit there and pass, but it also basically updates things there. One of the things that updates is family members. The legislation is quite outdated. It talks about all MPs having a wife. Well, many of them are women now, and also, I remember the first reading of the speech there, where they brought up with how the fact that Hannah Rafferty Michael Clark, the person she brought to Parliament of spouse figure was her father, because she was 18 or 19 years old at the time of being elected. So, yeah, it's definitely quite an interesting thing in there. And it's the biggest reform since Sir Geoffrey Palmer was in Parliament. So it's definitely on there.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok.